course, every country has its own challenges when it comes to setting up productive and accessible EV infrastructure. So in this panel, we would like to take a look at the progress of electrification on the global stage. So, panelists, are you ready? They're there. They're sitting down. Well, gentlemen, come join me on stage. Let's go. Come on, come on. Chop, chop. Oh, our music. Where's our music? Oh, come on. You can go without music. That's all right. Welcome, 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 everybody. So, our jingle music decided to take a little break, but we don't need jingle music. We have our experts here. So I'm very pleased to introduce you individually. We have the founder and CEO of eMobility Solution, Alfredo Pintos.
Hi, here.
Hello.
Thanks to be here.
We have the CEO of ChargeEV Inc., Philip Ju. Hello.
Nice meeting you.
And we have CPO and co-founder of Virta, Elias Pöyry. Hello. Every year I try and pronounce your name properly. You know, he's a veteran of the ICNC. So good to see you again. And the head of EV at Parkopedia, Adam Woolway.
Thank you.
Greetings. Okay, so maybe we can just start out. This is supposed to be a panel on different international perspectives. So just give us a quick summary. Where are you from? Where is your company based, and what markets are you going to focus on?
Thanks. So Virta was originally started from Finland, and as Finland is a small country, we thought that what national means to us is always European. So we started with European approach. We are now in 34 different countries. At the moment, we see Asia Pacific, especially Southeast Asia, as the next big growth area. So we are growing country by country. But maybe to comment on that already, Europe is not a single market area, as we all know. When we look at it from the regulation perspective, from any kind of cultural perspective, payments perspective, Europe is actually very difficult to conquer as one piece.
Thank you.
Well, our company, eMobility Solutions, is from Uruguay. Perhaps I explain a little bit where we are, because here is all the companies are from Europe or near Europe. So we are from Latin America. Uruguay is a small country of 3.5 inhabitants. We are located between Brazil and Argentina. Okay, big countries for us. So we are trying to promote the electromobility sector there in Uruguay. We are since there 5 years, and we are willing to receive lessons learned from the experience in Europe and tell a little bit what are our lessons learned. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay. ChargeEV is doing a business in Korea. We are CPO and EMSP, both parties. As a CPO, we are running 15,000 charging endpoint, and we have more than 100,000 subscribers as an EMSP. Korea is quite isolated because of North Korea. We are part of the continental, but we are pretty isolated. That's why there's some regulations and there are some barriers for the foreigners to do the business. That's one of the reasons we are very strong in Korea. Thank you.
Thank you. And?
Thank you. So I'm British originally. That doesn't normally come as a surprise to people that look at me for more than 10 seconds. But I've been involved in European EMSP business for the previous 10 years. Have focused firstly on the German market and then working out across the whole of Europe. And now with Parkopedia, there's also global internationalization. So looking at what's happening and forming partnerships in the North American market as well as the Asian markets as well.
So thank you very much. I think I find it very exciting just to see the such an international panel, and especially I have to say, having somebody from Latin America is very exciting at this conference. I mean, for obvious reasons, I think a large bulk of the participants are from Europe. I mean, it's obvious why. Alfredo, if you don't mind, I would actually just love to begin with you. If you could just speak to us in more detail about the challenges to scaling electric mobility in your country specifically, and maybe if you can speak more broadly about Latin America in general.
Yes. Perhaps we can focus a little bit in Uruguay, but basically are the same problems or disadvantages in order to promote the electric mobility. First is that we haven't got a lot of car brands present in Latin America offering electric vehicles. So this is a very important issue, okay? The other thing is that we have, in the region, we have production of IC cars, but we haven't got yet production of electric vehicles, okay? So when in the countries where there are production of IC cars, like Brazil, Mexico, and Argentina, when they start producing electric vehicles, we will have more offer. So this is the big issue for us. Okay. The other point is the price of the cars. Okay, they are too expensive today for individuals. We have some tax exemptions for companies that want to incorporate electric vehicles, but not for individuals. So for the mass scaling, we need lower prices for the vehicles. Okay. The other key point is the lack of funding for this kind of projects in Uruguay and in Latin America. Today, the investors haven't got all the information about the benefits of the electric vehicles in the ecosystem. So they are a little bit cautious in order to enter to the sector. Okay, so we haven't got, like here you have like venture capitals or risk capital in order to fund the projects. So these are basically the main problems that we have there to promote the electric vehicles. Okay.
Are there any thoughts on maybe a starting point for overcoming some of these challenges? And I invite our other panelists, if they have some thoughts on what would be helpful to Uruguay or other Latin American countries to overcome some of the problems that we just heard. So what's your wish list and what's your recommendations? Maybe.
Yes, if I may start. Being in 34 countries, what we have noticed that every country develops approximately with the same pattern. So first there is a government vision. It's let's have this and this many electric cars by a certain year, or let's have ICE phase out at certain year. The next phase is the government policies to implement this goal. And they are usually somewhat subsidies or government awarded contracts, things like that, that will kind of make the second wave. And the third wave then is that there is actual projects that come from the players who have need. Let's say Grab or Uber or somebody in the country realizes that, look, electric cars are much cheaper to operate than our conventional fleet, and then they start changing it, and then there's need for charging. And eventually it becomes a mature market where there is actual need for EV charging. But I think the pattern is all the same. So there is no kind of a golden egg to be found, but it goes step by step.
Yeah, I think maybe some of these next, I mean, whatever you want to call them, but these next wave markets in terms of EV also then have some sort of advantage on the rest. So in Germany and in Europe, of course, where we have maybe been working at the EV market since, I don't know, at least 2010, and maybe before that in some cases, there's been a number of false starts. There's been a lot of trial and error when it comes to the technology which is involved, what's going to work, what are the, I remember the debate still around plug standards, and what are we going to have the CCS plug, or is it going to be something else, that comes from France? What are all of these different debates that we've had and consumed a lot of time? This is in a step which, say, whether you are in Uruguay or whether you're looking from the Indian market or wherever that might be, where electric cars are going to come, you can then take those learnings that have been gone through for the last 10 years in the European and the American markets, and then take that as a real launch pad. So I think, if we look at, say, globally from an EV perspective, we know that the EV is going to come in Europe, right? I mean, absolutely mass adoption is on its way now already. We know this in the US. If you look at what governments around the world are saying, and you look at what the car companies are saying, then there's also no question that in the Uruguayan market, you're also going to have deep penetration of EV as well. So now you've got that opportunity to take what works from the European and the North American markets and then leave behind what hasn't worked out, and it gives you maybe a shorter route to market as well.
Oh yes, in order to comment to you some of the insight of 2021, the market share of the electric vehicles in the total was 1.5. Okay, and the forecast for this year is 3%. So we double the market share in 1 year, and every year is doubling. Okay, so what our forecast is that for 2030, almost 30% of the new sales of vehicles are going to be electric. Okay, and another advantage in Uruguay to promote the electrification of the energy of the transport matrix is that it's important to remark that in the past decade, Uruguay make a transformation of the energy matrix. Nowadays, almost 98 or 99% of the energy consumption provides from renewables. Okay, basically hydro, wind power, and PV. Okay, so we have excess of energy generation overnight that is excellent for charging the vehicles during the night. So it's a great opportunity there for fleets and for individuals and for long distance transportation to make this switch. And I ask a question here to the panel: why not? Perhaps in 10 years we can transform the transport matrix to perhaps 50 or 70% fully electric. It's a big challenge, but we have the possibility there.
Anyone want to comment or ask something? I think you look like you did.
Maybe as comment, usually it happens much faster than we anticipate once the growth starts. So I wouldn't be too worried, and I would say that your estimates are very conservative.
I hope so.
Philip, I want to ask if you could talk to us a bit about, you mentioned that in Korea, in South Korea, there are a lot of limitations on international investors investing in, well, anything, and in particular in the EV market. Can you explain to us a little bit about this barrier and how it affects the growth and the scaling of the EV market then in South Korea?
Well, it's not only limited to Korea, it will be universal. So the government, they try to put the incentive and subsidy to the CPO. So CPO should be a more localized company. And let's talk about the integrity. So this business, the most pain point for me is the integrity, because people thinking about the digitalization. Let's assume we take a taxi from the central station to my hotel. We download the application, we do the registration, we call a taxi, and we do payment, everything. And that's why I don't have to bring my cash. But in the back end, there is a system. However, that system doesn't have to cover the vehicle. Only they reach up to the taxi driver. So that's the difference between digitalization in taxi and EV charging. In case of EV charging, there is no summon between the charging endpoint and the subscriber. So we have to manage the charging endpoint. That's the pain point. So that's the barrier for the integrity. I think that's not only happen in Korea and also in German. So back to your question, integrity is the pain point to achieve, and also there is a barrier. However, the local company has to be the CPO to get the subsidy, and then there will be the partnership that MSP can achieve the market.
And looking at, let's say, the European market, how different is it then compared to this situation that we have then in South Korea?
Well, I think South Korea is a very special market. First of all, it's super mature already, so there is no kind of the early stage problem. But as we just heard, there are still some things to be solved in order to have the best possible user experience. So I think that's what we're all striving for. What I would say is what we've seen in all markets, that the market always starts by everybody saying that, okay, let's buy hardware. And they start buying cheapest hardware, AC hardware, because they think that this business is too small. The second thing is everybody thinks that now we need to build our own charging platform. And usually then starting to invest in this own technological platform, year by year, the costs go up and up and up, and then the cars are not coming. And then the platform will eventually die because it doesn't have the possibilities to survive on a financial level. And therefore, I think also in Korea, there are plenty of players or a few players that have built so-called multi-tenant platforms that can cater for several players. And I see that this is the only way for immature market to survive. And I think also in Europe, all the big players have entered into these multi-tenant platforms. There are very few who run their own platform, right, like we saw eMobility doing in just one country. And like you were talking about the digitalization, I think that in the end game, this is a cost efficiency game, and then it's economies of scale that can be won only with consolidation of the platform market. So that is obvious. Also looking at the Korean market, where there is quite many players.
Yeah, I think this is something we're also seeing that in very the more developed markets, or at least the markets which have been embracing EV for a lot longer, is that we have this perception that the EV market is still something which is very digital, right? It's something I like to talk about a lot. We all think that we're all clever because we're pioneers and we drive electric cars, and we all live digital existences. But actually, the EV industry beneath it is very, very analog, right? And that would likely be because if you look at the different markets, whether it's the North American market or the European market, they've been shaped by different types of companies coming up. So, if you look at the German market, the energy companies have played a huge role in this. If you look at, say, the British market, then it's really been more the small medium enterprises, the SMEs that started off and then got acquired by the oil and gas companies, etc. So you have this different makeup of markets, but there hasn't really been, current company accepted. There hasn't really been many pure software players involved in this market that understand from the bottom up how software really needs to facilitate this whole market in the background from a digital perspective. And that's why a lot of the times when we use the MSP products, we all have invoices which are wrong. This is why we have charging sessions which don't start a number of times and you have to plug in 3 times over, is because the software beneath it isn't integrated enough. And I think as we are moving forward into where we're getting to this mass market now, we're seeing that actually this whole topic of EV is much more complex than anyone ever thought, right? Down from the very basic concept of, what Parkopedia works on. So when I find a charging point, is there going to be a physical barrier in the way of that charging point from the parking lot, from that perspective, to the other one where, how is the charging point integrating with the grid and all of that kind of thing. And I think we're seeing now, whether it's in Korea or whether it will be in Uruguay or in Europe, we're seeing this transition now where more integrated software companies with a real core software dynamic are coming into the market that VC-backed, and that's going to help push that integration, and it's going to help that user experience, and that's really something which is going to take place across the world, I think.
In terms of CPO perspective, we have a common issue, how to populate the charging endpoint to the subscriber. For example, there is a 7 kilowatt level 2 charger. That level 2 charger can make 168 kilowatt hour per day. That's the maximum. I heard the other session talk about the dynamic pricing. So dynamic pricing, what does that mean? So 168 kilowatt hour multiplied by price will be the best revenue per day. So in case of 50 cents, the one level 2 charging endpoint can make 84 euros. So it depending on how much utilization happen on their charger. So but in the end, the dynamic pricing will be very keen for the CPO's perspective. But at this moment, what is the most important? Increase the utilization, and then they will think about the dynamic pricing after all. That's my opinion.
I'd like to pick up on the question of user experience, Adam, that you just touched upon. How is it changing? And when we look at different regions and different markets, and is it changing in similar ways? Is it changing in very different ways? Maybe each of you can talk about what you've observed in the markets where you operate, how the evolution of the user experience and where it's going.
Well, I can tell you a little bit what is happening in Uruguay. In Uruguay, we have only one local utility that is from the government, okay? And they are the only CPO and EMSP, basically CPO, that they install a charging station on the public, okay? So there isn't any other CPO present. So basically, an EV driver charges almost 95% of the sessions at home, okay, in the residentials or in the condos. So what they need is a good solution to program charges, because there in Uruguay we have different rates in different hours, okay. During, for example, from 6 o'clock in the afternoon to 10 o'clock, we have the higher price of the electricity. So the EV drivers doesn't want to charge there. So we have to program the charging sessions, program the charger to charge over this 10 o'clock in the evening. So it's very important that the chargers have the capability to make this possible, okay? And then in the experience in the public charging of the utility, there we have some bad experience because as is only one CPO, you haven't got any competence. So they don't care. The utility is trying to get available the charging station, but as we know that there are failures, they are not available. So the charging experience in the public for the EV drivers is not good at the moment. Okay.
Elias?
Maybe one interesting thing we're seeing in the very mature market is the ultra-fast charging coming to this kind of ad hoc charging places like shopping centers, malls, so on. So I think the ultra-fast is running over the AC in this kind of places, and only the destination where people stay overnight, like hotels, homes, offices, will be AC in the future. That's, I think, the major shift we have seen during the last year in the mature markets. The second thing that we are kind of expecting to happen is the customer service role. So if you look at the market, how it's built now, there is a call center. Everybody has a call center, and people call to call center, not just when they have trouble, but because they're new EV drivers and they don't know how to use their EVs. And would you call for help if you had an Apple phone and problem with that? No, you wouldn't. So that's what we believe will happen also in the EV market, that we will get rid of the call centers in the most mature market in the Western Europe. But on the other hand, in Asia, everybody wants to contact directly with WhatsApp or similar methods. So it's expected to have real-time answers to your questions through WhatsApp channel. And that's something that is very cultural specific. Maybe another thing is about payment methods. In some countries, it's very, very common to use just one-time payment. In other countries, 95% of the customers are registered. In Switzerland, everybody uses roaming, but in most countries, it's very, very narrowly used. RFID cards, I think they will be history very soon, so the app will be the only method of using, and then there are the other digital new technologies such as plug and charge. And on the other hand, the credit card readers, let's see what share of market will they take on the one-time payment side. But these are the changes that happen in very different pace in different markets. So this is not a common development we can kind of expect in all countries at the same time.
Integrity is the most innovative approach at the moment. So the customer perspective, they wanted to have the integrated user experience up to the charging endpoint. That's why the industry is noticing the plug and charge technology will make it enable. However, there is still a barrier, as I mentioned, the charging endpoint cannot really integrate it as what service provider want it to be. So that's the things to overcome. Well, the application like a smartphone, they can provide the information, they can provide the payment method, but still everything has to happen in front of the charging endpoint, so that integrity is the most important point to overcome.
Yeah, I think you can talk about integration as well, and then think about what you need to integrate with. So, I mean, in the last 10 years or so, I think I've seen EV user journeys come a bit full circle, if you like. So when a lot of the EMPs that are on the market today, so whether that's plug surfing or whether that's ChargeMap or other companies like that, a lot of them all started off focusing on the POI of charging points as being the main pain point for the user journey. So in other words, solving that question of how you find a charging point. Over time, that then evolved, I think, into more of a payment problem. So how do you then pay for that charging point? And everyone's pitch deck became a question of, once I found that charging point, I have 10 charging cards, etc., and I need to, how do you roam between charging points? And I think largely over time, that with the help of Hubject, etc., and other things like OCPI, that has largely been solved, and we're now seeing credit cards taking payment away from that pain point, and we're seeing plug and charge taking that role as well. And then instead, we've actually come back to this point where still the POI is something which is still, for a new generation of EV drivers, is still a massive part of the pain. So if we think about how people are buying EVs now, it's changing from pioneers who want to spend a lot of money on a Tesla, and it's changing to people who are having to buy an electric car because the government is mandating that electric cars are the only viable option for mobility, etc. And these people need, like you say, Elias, need more assistance in understanding how charging works, and they need more assistance in understanding how you can find charging points which are on semi-public ground as well, which is something which we focus on. Because if you look at where all charging points are going to be put in future, if we have this huge increase in charging infrastructure, then you're going to see a lot of publicly accessible charging points put in parking lots, behind barriers, in parking houses, etc. And suddenly then it comes down to integrating all of the POI together, both on the the parking side and the charging side, and making sure that the driver is able to access all of the information all at the same time in order to get to that charging point, hopefully reduce calls to customer services, hopefully make that user journey better, and then once they get there, then the payment should be relatively straightforward because you can just plug in or swipe a card. So I think we're seeing this real evolution or cycle, if you like, of the user journey, which we still need to go back and perfect.
Maybe that's a very good point, and maybe as a comment, we have in Asia opened all our charging points to object roaming as well, and made contracts that basically demand our customers to be in this open network of charging points. And hence, we see object roaming as a kind of a good reference point of how to build international roaming quickly, easily, and it's kind of one-stop shop. If you are on our platform, you can use it. And maybe my question is that could we see object integration in Korea, for instance? Could we see these kind of models of let's say, large-scale platform integrations to integrate with each other to form a global ecosystem? Because this is something that would, again, build both customer benefits as well as cost efficiency. Instead of the thousands and tens of thousands of CPOs and other players in the market trying to make bilateral connections with each other, that is a mayhem cost-wise.
Yeah, and I mean, just to add on to that then, that I mean, if we're talking about internationalization of these markets, and I think that you can look at each market and they've all evolved differently, and there's many reasons, they've different stakeholders, etc. But what I'm hoping is that a common theme among all of these markets is they're all waking up to this point now of roaming and of opening up with each other. And even if we look at the US market, etc., which was always very much a very vertically integrated market in comparison to the European market, even this is changing now. And actually, these major CPOs are embracing the open, maybe they're doing it on a bilateral way, but they're still embracing these much more open networks. And that's what I hope we're going to see.
Well, customer perspective, roaming is very attractive because they don't have to bring multiple RFID card. They just bring one card, and there's some more money to pay, but still using one card, they can go any charging endpoint and everywhere. But from service provider perspective, let's see the other industry like Netflix and Apple TV. And we have to see the contents. We wanted to see all the contents with one ID, but in the real world, we have to subscribe different ID, different services. So we have to pay different price. So from provider's perspective, roaming is very efficient for the customer, but provider's perspective, they don't want it to provide the roaming. They want to keep the customer inside of their network so that they can maximize the value and profit. So as a customer, EV customer, I'm also like roaming. It's very, very efficient. I like that. First day I arrived in Europe, and that my ID card is working in Europe. It will be very, very nice. I don't have to log in and register. But from the service provider, I want to let customer register into my customer and then pay to me, not through the other service provider. So it's quite conflict.
In Uruguay and in Latin America, we are a little bit behind the experience here in Europe, but now there are open discussions in further countries, in Brazil, in Chile, Argentina, no, because it's very down in the electric vehicles. But as soon as they ramp up the adoption, of course, the roaming platform makes a lot of sense because there is a lot of interaction between the countries. We have a lot in the summer. We have a lot of guys from Argentina that come to make vacations and go to the beach in our country. So, and the same from Brazil, and we also go to Brazil. So it makes a lot of sense to have one or two roaming platforms.
So we mentioned that as a country that is maybe later to the e-mobility world, at least the advantage of that is that you don't have to make the same mistakes that the early countries did and don't have to go through this trial and error, and you can just already observe what's working, what's not working, and then you can pick the approaches and solutions that are going to be effective. If you had a wish list, what would you like to see in Uruguay that is already working in other markets like Europe or North America or even in Asia? If you can observe all of these and pick and choose, which of the things would you want to bring to your own country?
I think some differential is the financial aspect, the availability of fundings for this kind of project that have long returns. Okay. Also, the ecosystem that is here in Europe, we are constructing it since perhaps 6 or 7 years, but it takes time. And we need that all the guys are involved. The national utility, the car dealers, all the brands, the companies that provide service. Uruguay have a very strong software sector, but already is not present in the electromobility sector. So we need that more capabilities are focused on the electromobility sector. So in order to create the ecosystem, we only have one CPO that is from the national utility. So we need more actors and increase a little bit the business. Okay.
And any maybe recommendations from other markets, advice for Uruguay?
I would say be prepared to scale, I think. So a lot of the time you have new entrants in the market, so new CPOs, for example. There's a lot of proprietary software out there. There's a lot of companies that, maybe, as we were mentioning, are maybe preliminary hardware providers and think, well, we can just put a bit of charging point software on there, because I think the basic CPO software that you can create is maybe not that complicated, but then the complex comes when you scale. And I think the benefit that you have is that there's a very big chance that you will increase your network a lot over the next few years. And I think if you get a partner in now, which already has the good software capabilities and has a solid foundation, then that's going to save you a lot of pain in the future. And I would imagine there's probably a lot of software companies out there that would look for a good entrance into an interesting market like Uruguay and take that advantage and get a good deal. And I think Virta is about to sell you something.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. And maybe to elaborate on that, when you scale, the energy functionalities of your charging become more and more important. So the dynamic load management capability to handle peak energy peaks, capability of future V2G, they are there for the future. And when this kind of industry as EV charging scales fast, we're talking about very big amounts of kilowatts and megawatts and gigawatts and so on. So when we enter the scale of nuclear power plants, like we have already several nuclear reactors worth of nominal power on our platform, the next thing is the information security. So it's not a joke, but actually when you switch off all our chargers, you might be able to even switch off the whole electricity network of a country because of this imbalance you cause by immediate reaction. So it's super important that the information security side is handled in a very professional level, especially at the times like this.
Thanks for the advice.
There is a mobility operator in each country, in each continent. And that mobility operator not only focusing on the EV, they focusing on the other mobility services. So to collaborate with each mobility operator would be very beneficial to shorten your penetration time.
I do want to open the floor up to questions from our audience. I know it is right before the lunch break, so maybe we can wrap up a little bit sooner. But why don't we just take a look at a couple of questions then that have been sent in from our participants. We can start with Alexandra, who has a question for Philip. Is ChargeEV planning on offering PUC functionality with Hubject certificate pool or another partner, such as KEPCO?
For the background of this question, KEPCO is a monopolist power distributor in Korea, the government company, and they are trying to do the same business as what Hubject does. So that's the background of this question, I think. ChargeEV has a very unique business sector in Korea. 10 years ago, when we initiated the business, we couldn't wait the B2C customer. At that time, it was only 4,000 customers. So rather than that, we decided to work with the OEMs. So like Hyundai, Mercedes-Benz, and BMW. And that's why we have a lot of business relationship in Korea with 8 to 9 OEMs. Now, plug and charge is a great customer journey from OEM's perspective, and I agree with that. So we have to do some choice among KEPCO and Hubject and also Hyundai. Hyundai is preparing the same thing. One of the reasons I'm here is to discuss about the plug and charge functionality with the Hubject. So Christian and I tried to expedite the plug and charge implementation in Korea, and that's one of the reasons I work with the Hubject. And I hope we can announce some good collaboration with Hubject within this year. Thank you.
Okay, so stay tuned, everybody. Stay tuned. Okay, let's have a look at another question from Margarita. She writes, why is Uruguay important for a test case in Latin America? Why should investors be interested in entering that market?
Well, I think one of the best important things there is that we have plenty availability of renewable energy almost during the night. Okay, that make a lot of synergy with electric vehicles, charging electric vehicles. Also, Uruguay is a oil importer, so we have one of the higher oil price in the world. Okay, so the TCO is very favorable for the EVs. Okay, the other point is that the government have very strong incentives, reducing or making tax exemptions for companies that invest in green technologies and electric vehicles. So there is a really a tool that can help very lot. And the other thing is that we are a small country. We haven't got long distances, so the range is not a real issue. Okay, so we have everything to make this transition. Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's maybe get one or two more questions from Minal, who asks, what strategies are you using to increase the utilization of chargers? So that would be interesting to hear from all the different markets. Maybe that's something that each of you can comment on. Should we begin in the row? So,
yeah, sure. So what we're doing is making the chargers much more visible. So we work, Parkopedia works with huge amounts of car companies. So 65% of all connected cars in Europe are using Parkopedia data to some degree, and 25% globally of connected cars use our data. So for us, adding, say, good quality POI on top of that, and then merging that with parking data, so showing you where you can charge your car and where you can park your car, and the restrictions that can happen if you're charging your car in a parking location, for example. That's something which is helping that user journey, giving more confidence to the driver, right? So this is still a big problem in the EV market among drivers, is having the confidence of knowing when you find that charging point, can you really get there, is it going to work, etc. So we overcome that, give that degree of confidence. Hopefully then that increases the utilization of charging, and then by then integrating the different payment platforms and EMSPs into our in-car commerce platform, which we provide to major OEMs, then we can also facilitate the payment of that charging. So really a case of trying to find all of the pain points and smooth them out, so charging a car becomes as easy as, as we all say, as filling up with gas.
I think this question is talking about the CPS strategy. So as a CPS strategy, we are trying to cooperate with other mobility operator in Korea, so that we can increase utilization. So it's like a wholesale contract. We have our own customer, and there is a willingness to chance that they pay money in front of our charger, but that's not efficient to make profit. That's why we have more major connection with a mobility operator, and they do the payment to their end customer, so that we can, in that case, will be more like a wholesale service provider.
I can talk a little bit about the utility, what is doing the utility to increase utilization. They have an app there where you can search the charging stations on the map. They have dynamic and static information of the charging stations, if they are available, if they have a socket or if they have a cable, okay? And on the other hand, they are trying to increase the disponibility of the charging stations with maintenance and with remote control, with working on the back end of that is a known development, okay?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting question in a sense that, are we talking about unit economics? Definitely not. The question is about your share of the charged electricity. And what we see is that if we look at AC chargers, the chargers are not expensive. So it's more question, first of all, of locations. You have to have the best locations where the users actually want to use the charging. The second is you have to have enough charging so that the user knows, enough chargers so that the user knows that they can always charge there. And then modulate the charging power if all the sockets are full. And the same applies nowadays for ultra-fast charging. So I am a big opponent of queuing and reservations and things like that. The new technologies enable us to have one power cabinet and unlimited number of sockets or outlets for the one power cabinet, and they are both modular scalable. You can add outlets, you can add power cabinets. So you should have enough outlets so that everybody can charge when they need it, and then limit the charging power, so the investment is in the grid side and not in this hardware side, especially not in the outlets or not in the AC chargers. So when you have the sites where you have availability, you get the players, the EV drivers to come to your sites, and hence then you get the market share. But you need the best locations, of course. It's a location game.
Why don't we take one final question from our participants? There it is. From David, he asks, how would you rate the level of exchange between the EU and Maricosaur in building up the EV industry?
It's a very good question. I think that when in Europe mass adoption will take place, more companies are going to stop looking into Europe and perhaps start looking into Latin America. That is a huge region here. There, we have plenty of projects in the bus transport sector. Okay, a lot of electric buses from China are being taking place in further cities in Latin America. So I think they are we will be more attractive for Europe in our region.
I think Latin America is at the same way as Southeast Asia in an interesting point between two different major markets that have already established their own way of doing EV charging. And I think this is something that we are looking into very, very closely, for instance, in Asia Pacific, that are these countries going towards the Japan or China standard, or are they coming towards European standard? Very few are going towards the US standard. And now it seems that the European standards, the European way of operating things is winning in Southeast Asia. Korea, I'm not sure. Korea is maybe its own kind of country, and hence Japan is another very, very closed market. But then Latin America, is it going towards US or towards Europe? And are we, at the right time, at the right place to win Latin America before the US companies will? That's my question.
No, Latin America is more close to Europe, so we are adopting all the standards of Europe, CCS and Type 2, okay? But perhaps the countries that are more near US have more influence of the US country there, but basically it's more Europe standards, yes.
Any final thoughts? So, gentlemen, Adam, thank you.
Thank you.
Philip, 감사합니다. Alfredo, gracias. Elias, you have to remind me how to say thank you in Finnish.
Kiitos.
Oh, God. Gentlemen, we appreciate all of your insights. Thank you so much. And thank you to our participants for the questions.